Hello, my name's Rhian Hope Price. I'm a counsellor, psychotherapist in the North Wales area. I've got an office base in Bangor, and I also do a lot of work online. But I'm here today to talk to you about the ecotherapy work that I do. So therapy in the outdoors, working with clients, making use of the wonderful North Wales landscape that we're fortunate to have here. So thanks ever so much for inviting me to speak to you today. Like I said, I'm going to be talking about ecotherapy, more specifically about eco-psychotherapy. I'll be telling you a little bit about the background to both ecotherapy and eco-psychotherapy. I'll talk a little bit about my practice, the way that I work, and look at some of the benefits and hopefully just give you a flavour of this way of working with clients. So, for me, as a psychotherapist who I enjoy my work as a psychotherapist, but I also have a real passion for the outdoors. Getting to combine the two is an absolute privilege for me. And hopefully if I can share some of these ideas with you, and it might, inspire some of you to explore this as a way of working as you develop with your career in this profession. Okay. So to begin, I'm going to, one sec. Yeah, to begin, I'm going to ask you just to just take a sort of moment to sit back in your seats, take a couple of deep breaths, really sort of settle in to this kind of session. And I'm going to show you some images. And I'm just going to ask you to just take notice and observe what thoughts, what feelings, emotions, physical sensations, what goes on for you as you're observing these different images. And we can look at this afterwards. So here we go, when you're ready. Okay. So studies have shown that even just looking at images of natural landscapes, so sunsets, the sea, rivers, and so forth, that can produce in us these feelings of calm, happiness, well-being, freedom, playfulness, expansiveness, possibility, curiosity, and many more. And obviously, if we were all together in person, we could have a bit of a dialogue around what those images invoked in you. But I know that for me, even though I've seen those images before preparing the presentation, there definitely was a shift in my experience of looking, say, at the sunset compared to looking at the busy traffic or from the laptop and the lovely sort of flowing river. So that was just to kind of whet the appetite, get you to start thinking about the potential benefits that the outdoors can offer us, really. So yeah, there's a wealth of research and anecdotal evidence that demonstrates that contact with nature positively affects our levels of stress, anxiety, self-esteem. It boosts our mood and our psychological well-being. I'm so convinced of this, and I'm such a strong believer in the benefits of nature that and contact with natural settings and this connection with the natural world. That that how it generates so much positivity for clients and myself, that it is part of my routine kind of way of working with clients. I will be asking, what is your connection with nature like? How much time do you spend in the outdoors? Is this something that maybe we can increase? Because there's almost like a natural prescription that's there on our doorsteps, and it seems a shame to not take advantage of that, really. So what is ecotherapy? In simple terms, ecotherapy is the umbrella term for the therapeutic benefits of the natural ecosystem. So this encompasses a variety of areas and varieties of ways of gaining ecotherapy, in a way, getting that therapeutic benefit. So that would be things like, it could be gardening, it could be outdoor adventure activities, it could be forest bathing, swimming in the ocean, and anything that involves being outdoors, hugging a tree. All of those things are relevant and powerful in terms of ecotherapy. It's a widely used term, ecotherapy. I was on a dog walk recently, and somebody that I sort of, a fellow dog walker, was just sat by the river, and they said, "Oh, I'm just having my daily dose of ecotherapy." That, and some friends of mine who've got an eco campsite, in their promotional materials, they talk about how their campsite will provide people with ecotherapy. So, I guess a question that could come to mind there is that, if these benefits are available anyway, why would a client require a psychotherapist to work with them in the outdoors when they could perhaps just go for a walk, for a swim, do some gardening? So this is what I kind of want to explore further with you now, in terms of what actual eco-psychotherapy is. So basically, eco-psychotherapy is one branch of that overarching term, ecotherapy. It's one of the ways of doing ecotherapy. So it moves from being simply ecotherapy, benefiting from the outdoors. So you've got ecotherapy, and then you've got psychotherapy. And doing psychotherapy outside is just doing psychotherapy. Ecotherapy is just being in the outdoors. The thing that makes that one concept is this kind of whole idea about there being an environmental and ecological focus on the actual psychotherapeutic process as well. So it's the prefix of the term eco to the word psychotherapy. I'll explain it in a little bit more detail. It's not just about the location of the psychotherapy. Then there is a deeper meaning, and that needs to be part of it for it to be eco-psychotherapy. So it is quite a new form of psychotherapy, and what is key here is that eco-psychotherapy understands that human relationships exist within the larger context of life on Earth. Eco-psychology looks at our psychology in relation to us as ecological beings. The disconnect in modern times between humans and the natural world, and the impact of this on both human health and the mental health of the planet, is also a key aspect here. Eco-psychology looks deeply at the reciprocal relationship, and this is really important within eco-psychotherapy, that we're looking at a three-way relationship with nature as an active participant in the process. So the reciprocal relationship is really about how, if I as a human am gaining benefits and getting great experiences within the outdoors and feeling that strong connectedness, that is going to boost my connection and increase my connection to the natural world. And then following on from that, I will have an increase in my concern around ecological issues, which will lead into positive behaviour change regarding ecological issues and the crisis that we're in ecologically, which obviously then in turn benefits the planet, which then the benefited and healthier planet will benefit me as the human. So that keeps on flowing, and it's really important and vital within eco-psychotherapy that we keep that in mind. Increasing a feeling of love towards the earth means that we are less likely to want to harm the earth. So here's some theoretical concepts around eco-psychotherapy. There isn't time in this presentation to go into detail, but these are some things that you maybe would like to do some further reading on, or what have you. So anthropocentrism is a relevant area of reading. Eco-anxiety, earth trauma, biophilia hypothesis is quite central to the way that I'm working. Eco-existential positive psychology, attention restoration theory, stress reduction theory, systems theory, and object relations theory. These are all really relevant and worth exploring if you've got an interest in this field. A quote from Rozak, an early eco-psychologist. How can the human psyche heal while the planet is in distress. So ecology and psychology need and depend upon each other. So, Ruzak suggests that eco-psychology is as much about the environmental and ecological issues as it is the psychological side. Um, Eco-psychotherapy does bridge that sort of traumatic dissociation between people and the planet. And just going back to kind of Earth trauma talks about how because we are so connected to the Earth, because that's how humans have evolved, it's such a deep connection with the planet, but there is a collective unconscious within all living things. So if the Earth is in distress, there's a school of thought that feels that humanity's mental health must also be in distress because of that. Okay. I've got a client actually currently who she experiences anxiety and low mood. And she's recently recognised that mixed in with her day-to-day, troubles and worries and issues, here and now stuff, she often finds herself distracted by or having dreams relating to environmental issues of the fate of the planet. And this has deepened for her, this concern, since that she's become a parent. She's also lives with this kind of layer of guilt and shame because she's got a larger than average family. So she's got 4 children, and that really kind of, because she is very environmentally focused, she feels there's an element of being a bit of a hypocrite because she's then got this, she's contributing to the overpopulation issue. So these are complex issues, and working with people around how they feel towards the planet and that kind of thing is an example of how, eco psychotherapy takes place not just in the outdoors, but also if it's part of your ethos, it takes place within the therapy room as well. So the 3-way reciprocal relationship, this is essential for what makes eco psychotherapy not just psychotherapy outside. So within indoor therapy, conventional therapy, the relationship between therapist and client is a key aspect. But in outdoor therapy, the natural world itself becomes this third participant in the process. So it's the role that both nature and the psychotherapist have in the client's process that makes this what it is. So the psychotherapist's task is to balance their own role within this dynamic to let the relationship between client and the natural world play out organically. So it's almost like a facilitating role. And it's powerful. So just wondering what to do here. How does so sorry, I wasn't sure what I was doing next. So what does an ecotherapy session look like? So here we go. So it begins with the usual kind of meet and greet that we have, with all our clients at the start of sessions in the room. Often it's perhaps when we're letting them in, we're walking to the therapeutic space. So that happens as normal, often in a car park or as we greet each other. But then as the session is about to begin properly, I will we will step over the threshold is how I sort of describe it to myself, and we step it into the therapeutic space. And I'll be explicit about this with clients. I will say, right, we're now moving into the therapy, we're moving in to start the session, we're going to be using this space, and I will be now holding the space for you. Prior to that, we will have talked about the route, we will have talked about some of the practicalities, but once we've stepped over the threshold, we're in that therapeutic zone. I will always mentally, and sometimes I'll involve my client in this, but definitely in my own mind, I will give thanks to the natural world for the space they're going to provide and the inspiration that's going to be available to us. It's my little kind of way of being. So what then the client is invited to start thinking about their intentions for the session, and I'll invite them to spend 5 minutes just walking quietly or standing quietly, gaining awareness of the surroundings, getting really into the space that we're in, setting some intentions. I'll then get them to expand that sort of into the awareness of the actual space around them. So maybe we'll start small and then expand into the bigger space. We then move into dialogue as we walk, stopping where appropriate. Me always being kind of the one guiding the route, keeping an eye on time, holding that process and containing the client's kind of psychological stuff. So as we all do as therapists, we will stop and maybe use elements of nature as appropriate. So that might mean picking up things from the beach that might represent members of family, so that then we can talk through that. Maybe parts work using elements from nature. Perhaps we'll pick things to represent feelings that we might then want to throw away into the sea. Sometimes we might see metaphors that pop up, symbolism, all that kind of thing. So nature will provide, always provides plenty of material. We then return to the starting point, and close as you would a session indoors. And I also then will give thanks to nature for what nature provided us with. We step back over the threshold, get into the small talk, booking the next session, and what have you. Okay, so challenges and practicalities. There's lots of things to consider with ecotherapy, and these are all things that you would contract about before starting to work with somebody in the outdoors. I don't tend to do a first session with somebody outdoors. I would always like to have met them at least online, ideally in the therapy room, to just gauge their appropriateness really for this type of work, and just managing risk in terms of client, in terms of their mental health really. But other things that are important to consider are physical fitness. So the fitness of the therapist, yourself, and your client. Sometimes you might get a client who's a lot fitter than you, so it's worth sort of bringing that into consideration. The weather, I don't work, we sort of contract with clients that we don't tend to work in torrential rain and howling winds. Bit of drizzle, is it okay? And it's about having appropriate clothing, but also knowing I've got on a lot of the walks that I do, I know where there's shelter available. So that's useful to have. Bumping into other people. So this is, when we pass us by, just strangers, the contract and agreement with clients is that we just fall into silence, go into a thoughtful space as we're kind of passing other people. And in terms of people we know, if I see somebody I know, I just say hello and carry on. But clients are, it's up to them. So I'll let them know, look, if you want to stop and talk, that's fine. I'll kind of wander on ahead. Really important to plan your routes, and to go and check how far is this route. If you haven't been on a route for a while, go and double check that it's still passable and there's no fallen trees to climb over and that kind of thing. Consider your client's fitness in this also. Calls of nature, so really useful, basic, practical thing, but to know where there's a toilet nearby. Remind your client that they might need to pop to the loo before you go on your walk. And being sort of needing to go to the toilet and not being able to find a loo is quite uncomfortable and distracting. So safety, things like first aid, water, sun cream, battery, they're all things that I would, spare battery pack, power pack things, useful just to have in your bag. I've never needed to use any of those things really, but the water's handy, and a spare bottle of water for your client is a nice touch. I have a colleague that I check in with and then check in again with at the end of a walk, so I'm expected to be back at this time. It's just a self-care really, that, and safety. It's important to inform your insurance company. So things like confidentiality, boundaries, time, and that whole containing the client, these are kind of bigger issues in a way that we often kind of assume that the room really kind of provides a lot of this, and the formality of being in the therapeutic space. And I think sometimes we kind of have a sense that the room itself is key for maintaining boundaries necessary for a therapeutic relationship. So exact timing, confidentiality, this kind of thing. But we don't need it to be the room. We can actually, as the psychotherapist ourselves, we can hold the process. We can contain the relationship through the relationship that we've got with our client, through good contracting, good boundaries and limits, and just containing them in a way that really feels safe. Containing clients with difficult emotions, or if they're in distress, can feel more challenging in the outdoors, that's for sure. Without the safety, of the walls, doors, ceiling, that box of tissues that we can reach for. But my feeling is that, it's a therapist themselves that whole process, wherever the work is taking place. It's also possible to find and create contained spaces in the outdoors, using natural landscape. So things like going under some branches of an old oak perhaps, or under the ledge of some rocks, Sometimes you find man-made shelters, bus stops, or that kind of thing. But even an umbrella can be a really nice way of just containing a client who's starting to kind of escalate in their emotions. One location that I use for ecotherapy has it's got like a rocky beach area. There's a woodland, and then there's a large open field. And but within the field, there's a circle of standing stones with like a centre. I don't know what it is, like a platform thing. It's something to do with the esteroid. But on a number of occasions, I noticed with clients, once we've been on our walk, they're drawn to go and sit in that within the centre of those stones. And that's where we quite often unpack and process what's happened in the session. And it's just interesting that this area of standing stones feels like a place of safety for deeper reflection. And it's more than one client have had that kind of been drawn to that spot. A young person that I was working with once on a beach at low tide and became quite emotionally distressed, and they were feeling very vulnerable in the expansive space. There's so much room. I guided her to a rock near the dunes to sit down and get a sense of safety. And I'll talk later about the elements and the impact of using the elements with clients. But the container in this context didn't actually need to be a shelter, but rather somewhere to feel grounded. She later reflected actually that the rock had also looked isolated as the only rocky part on this large open beach. She, from that, had gained this sense of connection to the rock, and that enabled her to feel safe with the strong emotions that she was experiencing. So that's an example of me as a psychotherapist holding the frame and the natural world providing what was required, to support the client. So another case example for you was a client who was in her 70s and she wanted to try ecotherapy. We'd worked together for a while indoors. But following the first session, she really reflected that the uncertainty that she'd felt about the route and the lack of confidence in her own physical ability had really hindered her experience. It had made her feel more vulnerable and dependent on myself as therapist, and really sort of shifted for her that kind of power dynamic between us. Of course, everything is useful, everything is material, isn't it, in psychotherapy? So this gave us useful content for the session. And as her experience of getting older and the physical changes that she was experiencing, she had issues with her eyesight and hearing loss, and they were affecting her confidence in everyday life. So that unfamiliar and potentially dangerous location of our session kind of exaggerated the current life experience that she was having, and it really helped her articulate what she was feeling. So these experiences in the outdoors acted like a metaphor for the real life concerns and fears, linking, what she was experiencing in the session to actually her real life stuff. So next time we chose a route that she already knew. I ensured that I explained the route in advance, made sure that she understood I was in charge of timings. It's really key to prepare clients if there's going to be tricky parts on a walk, muddy bits, places that might be a bit steep, and you're just really prepping people in advance so that they're not, too alarmed by what comes their way. You can't prepare for everything. Nature always brings, the natural world isn't a predictable space, but as much as possible with some people that helps. Quick time check. So another case example is of a young woman who was experiencing depression and disappointment in her current life situation. She'd achieved a great deal academically and professionally, and she was frustrated with herself really that she had neglected her personal life. So her current situation, where she was in her mid-30s, single, hadn't begun a family, and it was causing her concern, as well as feelings of loneliness as her peers had all begun to settle down into their family lives. She was collecting pebbles on a beach to use in a timeline activity, but she got distracted by stacking pebbles, making towers. It was clear to me that she was getting a lot of joy and sense of peace from this. So I reflected on it with her later. She told me she was remembering camping trips as a child. It connected her back to a younger self. And we explored this further with me asking about her ambitions when she was younger, which led her to see her current self in a much more favourable light. She was more able to feel compassion towards herself in more recent years, striving to achieve goals And she was able to appreciate the successes and value in her life. Didn't change her situation, but it did add a sense of acceptance and opened her mind to the possibility of maybe meeting somebody and getting the things she wanted out of her life. So my role as therapist here was simply to guide the client to explore more deeply the experience she had while connecting with nature. And it did support the client to increase the levels of self-compassion, reduce judgments, relating her own experience of the present moment more gently, with less kind of cognitive reacting. So that the sort of playfulness and childlike quality that being in and interacting in the outdoors is often apparent with clients in sessions. In sessions with clients, sorry. And it's really useful, remembering how to play, as well as kind of opening the door to work with some inner child material. You know, it's other examples I could bring in here, clients who want to paddle in rivers, climb on trees, skim stones. There's so many examples, but that basic experience of reconnecting with that childlike playful state, boosting curiosity is so much a natural escape from the busyness of kind of adult life. And nature can be seen as a non-judgmental space, in which the voice of the inner critic can be softened for a while, which I think is a really kind of nice way to look at it. It's that sense of wonder and awe connects us to that felt sense of nature as at our very core. Okay, so I'm going to talk about one more element. So there are things like metaphor, synchronicity, all those kinds of things, symbolism that crop up within the natural world often, and they crop up in surprises really. And whilst I was on a mindfulness retreat, the leaders began the morning session by reading the poem Wild Geese by Mary Oliver. Later that morning, during a silent walk by the lake, a large group of wild geese flew past. And the synchronicity of this felt powerful and moving for most members of the group. These kind of powerful coincidences are interpreted uniquely and differently by clients, pay no regard, but others are really moved and inspired. Metaphors from the natural world I've also talked about become integral to the sessions, you know, relating the effort of walking up a hill to overwhelming tasks, getting lost to the sense of being lost in life, or embodying the grounded or solid nature of a mountain or of a tree. You know, embodying these things. And the whole idea of symbolism, metaphor, and synchronicity feel to me similar to the intangible and spoken things that often occur within the therapeutic process. And these things just seem to happen more often in the outdoors than in any other type of therapy that I have been part of and providing. Okay, so I'm just going to end by reading to you a poem by Mary Oliver, The Wild Geese. So, you do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls you to the wild geese, calls you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things. Okay, so that's the end of my presentation. I can provide you with contact details if anybody wants to get in touch to discuss any of these things further, or even to inquire about training or recommended reading. Thanks once again for listening today. Thank you.